Khumalo.
In the last video, we saw how Patchwork had the potential to be a very good economy card in our Khumalo deck. Unfortunately, we were also playing 2 copies of Divide and Conquer, which we did not manage to show off. So this is the motivating factor for this episode, to show off that card. Let's talk about it. Divide and Conquer is Anarch's new multi-access in the New Reign and Reverie big box, and I would really like to compare it to Deep Data Mining because they are very similar in a lot of ways. They are both run events, they have 3 play costs, and they have a 4 influence cost if you're splashing it out of faction. And of course, it allows you to, both cards allow you to access multiple cards, but from different places. Divide and Conquer has 2 big advantages over Deep Data Mining that make it quite superior if you actually manage to get it work very well. At its baseline, Divide and Conquer only accesses 2 cards, one of R&D, one of HQ, assuming Archives is empty. So 2 card access is a lot worse than Deep Data Mining's potential 5 card access, but as we'll soon see, there are some really nasty combinations. Firstly, Divide and Conquer attacks the most vulnerable central server. Instead of HQ or R&D, all you have to do is run Archives, which is typically the most lightly defended. So that's very important because if Divide and Conquer is such a strong card that it induces corps to preemptively ice Archives, you're probably winning anyway because HQ and R&D are weaker as a result. The other important thing is that Divide and Conquer scales very well with HQ and R&D multi-access, and that is where Divide and Conquer truly shines. Because if you, for example, have a HQ interface and on top of that an XIII, which acts like an R&D interface, then you are accessing 2 cards from HQ and 2 cards from R&D. Sounds good? Well, what if I told you it's about to get better? Because there's a card that does multi-access better than HQ interface or XIII. That's right, it's everyone's favorite competitive multi-access, Turning Wheel. The Turning Wheel is bonkers with Divide and Conquer because it allows you to access 1 additional card from HQ or R&D. And yeah, the wording here is ambiguous. You could argue that by spending 2 power counters, you should only get additional multi-access from either server of your choice, not both. But from what I saw, someone posted a screenshot of this Facebook dialogue. Jacob Draco, better known as Jacob Morris, who handles the unofficial FAQ for Netrunner, did unofficially confirm that Turning Wheel actually boosts both the HQ and the R&D multi-access. When you spend 2 power counters, you actually get +1 access on both servers, which is very ridiculous, giving your Turning Wheel counters twice the mileage. So because of that, we are going to play it as it is. Even though the unofficial FAQ is not out yet, we'll go with this unofficial ruling, which officiates that we are going to get lots of crazy multi-access with Divide and Conquer. I mean, just think of it. The best case scenario is a completely loaded Turning Wheel with 8 power counters. If you spend them all, you'll get to access all of Archives and access 5 cards from HQ, which is basically all of HQ, unless you're up against Cerebral Imaging, and then 5 cards off the top of R&D. That's a lot of cards. That is more than twice as many cards as you would get via single Deep Data Mining. Now, of course, this is a 2-card combo. Obviously, this means that you won't be able to assemble it every game. But keep in mind that these cards are fairly decent on their own merit. Divide and Conquer slightly less so, but Turning Wheel, already a tier 1 card that sees play in the likes of top tier Valencia decks. You definitely wouldn't mind throwing a couple of Divide and Conquers in your existing tier 1 Anarch deck and make it all that more threatening. New Omar Kyung is going to attack Archives like it has never before. Right, now I know a lot of you are probably up in arms having learned about this interaction and are probably going to take to my comment section lynching the game designers or whoever makes the rules for this stupid combo, but please hold your torches. We are not here for that. We are here to showcase this little interesting card against Sports Metal. Now, Sports Metal, I'm just going to briefly introduce it because I haven't done a successful demo of it yet. For those of you unaware, this is the new HBID in Reign and Reverie that allows you to either +2 credits or +2 cards whenever an agenda is scored or stolen. So this ID ability is gonna fire pretty often in this game, which is why I'm bringing it up in case so you'll know what's happening. As always, this video was made before Reign and Reverie has been implemented on Jinteki.net. As such, expect a lot of manual clicking action. Right, let's get down to this sports game. Alright, today we are playing. What is this disgusting opening hand? Gee, no. We are not keeping a hand with 3 bin breakers. That is totally awful. No. Yeah. I mean, this is a successful demo on Divide and Conquer, but we are not going to keep a hand like that. No. In fact, Divide and Conquer is not really a good card to draw early. You want to draw it late after you've set up your turning wheel. Now, after my mulligan, we draw into a pretty meh hand. I'll be honest, 3 breakers to 2 breakers in your opening hand isn't much of a consolation, especially when you have duplicate consoles in your hand. But we'll make this work. After all, seeing console early is actually a good thing. It being an economy console and everything. So we're gonna drop the patchwork and then use the patchwork to install daily casts. This should give us enough money for the rest of the game. Okay, not the rest of the game, but at least the rest of the early game, at least to tide us through the early stages. Unfortunately, this allows our opponent to basically just abuse this window to just pump out agendas like never before, but instead our opponent decides to score a 0-point agenda. I'm not complaining, we'll take that any day. So we're just gonna continue setting up here. We're gonna draw, and then I'm like, okay, well, this deck really spends a lot of clicks drawing. We are going to get mileage of the dirty laundry that we'll play with patchwork, discarding a patchwork for the patchwork trigger. And of course we install the Yusuf beforehand so that we get a virus counter on Yusuf. But yeah, you notice every single turn I'm ending my turn with fewer cards in hand than I started with. These click for draws are really inefficient, and I'm just not drawing into my I've Had Worses or Injects or Earthrise Hotels. Not good news here. So as I continue drawing to no avail, I decide to use my first of 2 virus breeding grounds as patchwork fodder to install the turning wheel. Now I can start hammering centrals. Hopefully this will give me some turning wheel counters to divide and conquer with. So I'm not worried about code gates because I can break them with clicks. Fairchild 3 and 2 are no problem, and Architects no problem either with MK Ultra in the bin. Barriers could be a problem, but I have Yusuf with 1 virus counter, and guess what? It is the weakest barrier on HQ, Vanilla. Oh boy, I'm glad to see that. My Yusuf is able to infinitely sustain breaking this single Vanilla, so I'm almost certainly going to run HQ 4 times here. I'm almost certain Server 2 is an NGO front. It could be a trap, but I'm leaning towards NGO front. Given the way my opponent advanced it, it seems pretty obviously to be a ruse, and I'm not going to even bother checking it. Instead, I'm just going to hammer HQ 4 times, trash a Kelly testing with real credits because I don't have enough virus counters. We see another Kelly testing. Right, that's 6 influence on Kelly testing. Very important to note there. My opponent is very much all in on fast advance or a big 7-point combo. Anything's possible with sports metal, you never know. On my 3rd hit, I see a domestic sneakers which I steal. And this triggers Sports Metal's ability, which allows my opponent to refill their hand to 4 cards. Very interesting. They may have drawn more agendas off the top, so we're going to run HQ 1 last time and see a research grant. We take those. We definitely take those. So our opponent is definitely running lots of small agendas. So the typical all-in Sports Metal deck that, just flat out dies to something like Shadownet. But that's fine. We are not running Shadownet, but we definitely have ways to counter Sports Metals, increasing in power as you steal more and more agendas. Now, our opponent here installs something behind a piece of ice in server 3, and I can choose to contest it or not. A pretty tricky scenario here because I do actually want to set up my money. But given that it's first click run, I should be able to get through safely unless it's an end the run code gate as my opponent showed me there. So I'm forced to be kicked out here, and I'll spend the remainder of my turn drawing up. Drawing into an inject, I wonder if I should inject here. Instead, I decided to install the SMC. So no patchwork triggers this turn because there was nothing in my hand that I could play for 2 credits or more. I'm not going to Divide and Conquer here just yet. I want the big Divide and Conquer combo for 8 power counters, as we mentioned in the intro. Now, our opponent scores a Hyperloop extension here, which, for those of you unaware, gives the corp 3 credits in addition to the 2 credits they get off Sports Metal's ability. So a net gain tempo agenda, but the scoreline is still 1-1, and we've just drawn into 2 copies of Employee Strike. I don't think we need that many. There are 3 copies in my deck, so I'll happily ditch one for the Patchwork trigger, Dirty Laundry Archives. So the Dirty Laundry is free to play, we get 5 credits off it, and then we play a bunch of cards from our hand. Going back down to 2 cards in hand, you see how quickly we chew through our grip when we get Patchwork triggers left, right, center. Now our opponent baits us into running the Enigma server, and I have to bite here. I really have to. But don't forget, if you watch the previous video, you will remember that you can install, you can use Patchwork on mid-run installs, like installing MK Ultra from the bin, or in this case, installing Black Orchestra from self-modifying code. You can definitely do that, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to ditch a Reclaim here for Patchwork to fire Gamble. Well, we are going to use Patchwork's trigger on Sure Gamble, so we won't use it on the mid-run install here. Doesn't make a difference. We are going to mid-run install Black Orchestra to break Enigma, and access, obviously, their NGO front. Surprise, surprise, it had to be NGO front. We just needed to make sure it wasn't a 3-point agenda. We still got a consolation prize of a virus counter on Yusuf, so I'm not complaining there. But it did cost us quite a few credits to get the Black Orchestra out, and now we're back down to 5 credits. So I definitely want to play the money card in our hand in Liberator account. That entails discarding 1 card to Patchwork, because I'm only on 5 credits. To install Liberator accounts, I would need to reduce its install cost by 2. The question is, which card do I ditch into archives here? I need to hold on to my final copy of Virus Breeding Ground, because I might otherwise get locked out by vanillas on all servers. That would be ugly. I also want to keep my draw card in I've Had Worse, so I decided to ditch the Data Sucker here. Right, I'm going to get a bunch of money off Liberator account, risking that my opponent would score something in server 3, and sure they did. They scored a 3 advanceable agenda. The future is now. That is a very scary card to see. They're almost certainly tutoring Fast Break, which is the new Rain and Reverie card that synergizes with these sort of small agenda decks, giving you an extra click for every agenda in the runner score area. So I'm very worried about that, but not much we can do at this point. Our opponent is ahead of us in terms of tempo, in terms of setting up their ice with respect to my ice breakers. I technically have my entire breaker suite, my MK Ultras in the bin, but I do not have the money to sustain runs. That's the problem. Right, so we move on now as my Earthrise finally dries out. That Earthrise has been huge. I can't stress enough how important it was to have Earthrise ticking down so that my Patchwork could get constant fuel. Now I'm going to set up my late game economy source in Consume. Definitely want to throw that on the table before making any further runs. The question is, once again, what do I ditch for Patchwork? Consume is 2 to install, so I want the discount. I'm not going to ditch my draw card because I have no other draw card, so I've Had Worse needs to stay. Virus Breeding Grounds, as mentioned, is important and needs to stay. The obvious choice here would be the duplicate Divide and Conquer, but I'm hoping that my opponent is unaware that I'm about to launch a big Divide and Conquer at them. So I don't want to give away this surprise. I do not want to ditch my duplicate copy of Divide and Conquer. So I'm basically forced to ditch one of my money cards to get money off Patchwork. It sounds really stupid, but Patchwork's ability is clickless, whereas playing Sure Gamble or Daily Cast outright is not clickless. I know, this might be a mistake, ultimately. It's almost always worth playing Sure Gamble and Daily Cast normally rather than sacrificing them for Patchwork. But that's exactly what I'm doing here. I sacrifice a gamble for Patchwork so that I can install Consume on the HQ run, but I get stopped short by an Archer. Ooh, didn't see that one coming. Right, so I can install MK Ultra here and spend 9 credits breaking, but that means I only break 2 of the 4 subroutines. That's too expensive. I can't afford to. If I break both trash program subroutines, then I would have just lost a lot of tempo. If I break the other 2 subroutines, then I'm getting my entire rig trash, and that's not worth it either. So I decided to basically just let the entire Archer fire and lose my entire board state. This is a very questionable move, but because of the way I played earlier, because I did not review the Divide and Conquers in my hand, If my opponent makes the misplay of leaving archives undefended, I might still have a chance to win this off archives. So I'm gonna hit the archer, get basically ripped to shreds, and then run R&D here, knowing that I still have enough money to break the likes of Fairchild 3, or Fairchild 2 or something like that. I won't be able to break barriers, but HB barriers generally don't have painful subroutines, so I'm fine with that. Let's see if our opponent attempts to stop us here. Really, all we are trying to do at this point is to gather lots and lots of turning wheel counters. My opponent sacrifices another agenda point to reveal a second archer. I'm like, okay, since my entire rig is basically trash, you can trash my Black Orchestra at this point. I don't really care. I'm getting an extra turning wheel counter out of this. And now, because I'm entirely rig wiped, my alternate strategy of dividing and conquering has just come into effect. Archer is a very dangerous ice that you never want to farm turning wheel counters off, but when you have no programs installed, Archer suddenly looks very juicy. I'm going to run HQ 3 times here. My opponent gets 6 credits off Archer, but that's totally fine because I'm not up against a deck that cares about credit differential. We are not up against hard-hitting news or punitive counter-strikes, so we good. We can run HQ and R&D as much as we want. Right? I'm going to farm up to 8 power counters on turning wheel and then do a massive divide and conquer. So our opponent attempts to stop us from doing exactly that by icing up HQ, but that's fine. R&D is still exposed with the outermost archer, so we're just going to run R&D 3 times here. Right? Let's go. Yeah, so I'm just basically farming lots of turning wheel counters at this point. Now I do know that I probably will not win the game off a single divide and conquer. I'm only on 1 agenda point, I need 6 more to win. So even though I access 10 cards between HQ and R&D, I probably won't win. So I want to make sure I have enough turning wheel counters for both, to play both divide and conquers, right? Okay, my opponent here scores something, a research grant, allowing them to get sports metal draw, and with the remaining clicks, install something on R&D, so stopping me from getting turning wheel counters from now on. Is it time? Is it time to divide and conquer? I have the 8 power counters on wheel, and I do have an undefended archives to abuse. Do I? First, I'm gonna play I've Had Words, because Divine Conquer is expensive. Don't forget, it's 3 to play. It can be discounted by Patchwork, which is exactly what I'm doing here. I'm gonna play Employee Strike first so my opponent doesn't get a bunch of sports metal draws, and then we are gonna go crazy on R&D and HQ. We're gonna play Divide and Conquer, subsidized by the Patchwork on Patchwork. I discarded my duplicate Patchwork once again, and now we are dividing and conquering. I'm going to expend 8 power counters during the archives run, which allows me to access 4 additional cards off the top of HQ and R&D. This basically means the ideal scenario has been hit. I'm going to access all of HQ, all of archives, and 5 cards off R&D like a normal data mining would. So this is going to be a lot of cards. Let's see if our opponent has stashed anything in the bin. And yeah, as my opponents, as it dawns on my opponent that they're about to get hit real hard, yes, turning wheel unofficially works with Divide and Conquer, so we're going to access a whole bunch of cards. Again, I don't think I'm going to win off this, but I'm going to get pretty close, right? So let's see how far we can get. We are, it's not implemented on Jinteki.net yet, so I'm just manually executing the Divide and Conquer here. I see Biotic Label, IPO, Global Food, that's the restricted card, Archer, and NGO Front, which I manually trash. So that puts me up to 3 agenda points. Still very far away from winning this game, but at least I've wiped my opponent's hand of agendas. Now we are going to do the R&D portion of Divide and Conquer, and we're going to see Hyperloop Extension, 4 agenda points, Global Food, 6 agenda points, Fairchild 2, Hyperloop Extension, that's 7 agenda points, that wins me the game before I access the final card of R&D. Boy, that felt dirty, almost like a diaper deck. And yes, indeed, my opponent did not have much choice. As soon as I set up the turning wheel, they were faced with a very tough conundrum because I was so willing to let Archer fire. Either they re-ice HQ and R&D as they did, putting an outermost piece of ice to deter turning wheel runs, but the opportunity cost of that is icing archives, which allowed me to get the big divide and conquer run off. Their alternative was to ice archives, but that meant that R&D and HQ would have been exposed. I would have hammered those servers for more and more turns, gaining lots of turning wheel counters, and I might have just won off a regular R&D run, without any need for dividing and conquering even. So the power of divide and conquer really comes even before the card is played. Already, with the threat of a possible divide and conquer, the corp is forced to divide their attention across the servers, and already they are being divided and conquered even before you play that card, because you can potentially just run HQ or R&D normally instead and use those turning wheel counters as you normally would. And yeah, no matter what the corp does, they cannot stop me from digging through R&D. That's what usually happens in the late game, where you stabilize your scoring remote such that the runner cannot keep checking. The problem is, with divide and conquer, it gives you an alternate route into R&D. For the corp to stop you from getting big R&D accesses with turning wheel, they need to defend from both R&D and archives, and that's a very tall ask. Because all I need is a single successful R&D run or a single successful archives run while playing divide and conquer, and I can unload as many turning wheel counters as I like to win the game. So, with this backdrop of divide and conquer seemingly being completely unfair, possibly completely bonkers and broken in tandem with turning wheel, I don't think it's something that should be banned. I think that this is going to be very controversial, but I think divide and conquer is okay. Perhaps I wouldn't mind limiting divide and conquer such that turning wheel can only be used either on R&D or HQ, not both at the same time. But this game really showcased the best case scenario with divide and conquer. I managed to get 6 agenda points off a single DNC. And yeah, that was more agendas than expected. But in your typical game, trust me, if your corp opponent is actually on the ball and putting pressure on you as they're getting to match point very quickly, your divide and conquer will do nothing. Take me on my word for that, because you need to find your turning wheel first, and you need to spend 2 or 3 turns farming up those turning wheel counters. That is a very, very slow process. If the corp is installed double advancing against you when they are on 4 agenda points, threatening a 3-point agenda for the win, can you still run HQ and R&D to charge out your divide and conquer? I don't think so either. And you can't just fire a divide and conquer prematurely, because by itself, divide and conquer is a very mediocre card. As I mentioned at the start, it's no DDM without the turning wheel interaction. And my opinion is, if you're playing a slow corp, one that, takes forever to score agendas, or even a prison deck that doesn't even attempt to score agendas, you deserve to be divided and conquered. You deserve to have 15 cards access off the top of R&D and HQ. For all I care, because you're not placing pressure on the runner. You deserve to lose. And divide and conquer aptly punishes said corps that are, just not playing Netrunner the way it's supposed to be. Scoring agendas and forcing the runner to react to them. So yeah, for that reason, I think divide and conquer is fine as it is, even though it seems pretty strong. I think the fact that it suppresses prison decks by making sure that you don't just hide behind tour guides and spam assets all day, is a good thing. For this particular sports metal game, my opponent wasn't dulling in the sense that they were actually actively trying to score agendas. They had a scoring remote going, and I actually couldn't penetrate it for the most part. However, the problem with my opponent's strategy was that they were relying on scoring a bunch of 1-point agendas for the win, and that's a very painfully slow way to get up to 7 agenda points. By the time my opponent scored 3 agendas points worth of agendas, I managed to get the turning wheel set up. So yeah, their scoring strategy was pretty slow, and that's why they got divided and conquered. Now let's move on back to Patchwork. We talked about it last time, but this time I managed to, use it to greater effect because the game lasted longer. Throughout this game, I ditched 8 cards to Patchwork, which meant that I got 16 credits worth of discounts from Patchwork. That's a net gain of 12 credits after considering Patchwork's install cost. So yeah, for a single click installing the Patchwork, I get 1 MU and 12 credits total. I would not have been able to make it to the mid to late game without Patchwork's passive economy. It was that good and saved me a lot of credit clicking. I only clicked for credits once throughout the entire game. So yeah, very great card that really boosts an economy. And yeah, can't say more than that. It gave me more money than Steam Hack. Can't complain about that. So wonderful card. And even though Divide and Conquer seemed to be the MVP this game, it was actually Patchwork that was the workhorse behind all of that, allowing me to set up all the two install cost cards, my Virus Breeding Ground, my Turning Wheel, playing my Divide and Conquer. All these cards are expensive. Patchwork gets you there. Well, I hope you try this deck, because this Khumalo deck was very fun to pilot, very fun to build, and pretty powerful as well. Thanks for watching Happy Net Running. I'll see you next time.